After my first hard surface practice video had a few issues, I felt I should explain just what the workflows are so you know which to use and when and what for. So in this video we'll take a look at sub-D versus bevel shader modelling for hard surface. Stick around to the end to hear which one I prefer to use. Before we get into it, I do need to mention booleans. Booleans, if you don't know, are basically math for 3D objects. You can subtract and add objects together, as well as slice and intersect. I'll do a full video on those at a later date, so subscribe if you don't want to miss it. For now, it's sufficient to say booleans can be used with either of these workflows. Alright, so first up, sub-D modelling. At its most basic, this is using subdivision surface modifier to give you those lovely round highlight catching edges on your model. You add edge loops to control how tight the rounding is, and that's pretty much it. Some of the benefits of this method include creating that organic hard surface look you tend to get in, say, sci-fi body armour. It's easy to edit the mesh underneath the modifier and build up levels of detail once the curvature is established, and circular details are easy to add as most squares will get rounded without support loops. Drawbacks to sub-D are having to use edge loops as support geometry, higher poly count and potential performance limitations, and shading errors when adding detail on curved surfaces. Masters of this workflow include Aramis 3D and CRNT designs. Onto the bevel shader workflow. With this method, you set up materials with the bevel shader plugged into the normal slot. You have full control over the amount of bevel and the material as a whole. You can work focused on the silhouette of the model, as you know there will be no further smoothing from sub-D. Some benefits to this technique are less geometry, which equates to better performance and stability, and as the bevel comes from the material, you can set up multiple materials for varying levels of detail. Potential drawbacks include when you come to texture model, you may need to rebake if the textures have their own normals, which is likely, and that circular details have to be fully modelled into the geometry, as no rounding occurs as it would do with sub-D. I learned this method from Simon Fuchs in his excellent drone tutorial available on his Gumroad. You can, in theory, use both methods, but as with my first hard surface practice video, it can crash Blender. Personally, my preferred method is currently the bevel shader method. It allows much greater control and allows you to focus on the form of what you're creating, rather than stopping to make sure you have the right topology around edges and changes in direction. However, I will say that if you are getting that sort of writer's block where you sometimes stare at the default cube not knowing where to start, doing some freeform sub-D modelling is a fun way to snap yourself out of it. Take care.